So I'm hearing from all that you've just said is that really you weren't trying to make the precursor to the D7, you were trying to make an amalgam of some of the art styles of both the Raptor and also future just general designs. Even though I
Yeah.
think we take it as a distinct evolution, you weren't thinking along those lines, which I think is quite interesting.
Well, it's funny because we're basically supposed to be behind the original series a little bit, and so having a blueprint, so to say, in front of you, it's very nice to try and play an homage to what has already been done. Yet you can't go back to a 1960s style in the 2000s, and so you always try it, but it doesn't make it. Now they need the details, they need the scribe lines and the paneling and all that stuff that was kind of void in the old shows. It was very smooth detailing, and that was the 60s style. So that's the other battle, trying to make something old, but you can't use the original references as where to go back. So you can only choose shapes, and that's kind of where that comes together.
Mm.
And it's funny because what Andy Probert had to do on the Next Generation is they were very big on formatting to TV. And the same when Galactica came out. I go, oh, we can't have big ships that are on and off the screen. And that kind of, not necessarily a true theory, but it proved not to be exactly what it needed to be when the other shows came out. So his Enterprise D was TV format. His ship is originally his original Romulan was upright, and it would go above the TV screen. So they flipped it against kind of what he was trying to design there. But everything was really fought off to fit a TV screen where you could see the whole thing. And now, well, during the Enterprise, they didn't care if it bled off the screen or not. So that kind of premise of it has to always be seen in one piece went away. And so we didn't have to kind of fight with that anymore.
Well, you kind of broke the trend by making the true widescreen ship, the Enterprise E. Hell of a widescreen.
There you go.
So anyway, back to the D5. The ship is clearly more angled. I do agree with you, more primitive feeling, as was part of the design, with the support cables and such. But why do you go for such a dramatic angular styles, the nacelles and bridge being literal points? What does that signify to you design-wise, and why do you think the Klingons would have gone there? Is there any real design advantage to such pointy hull geometry?
A lot of things in the approval process are aesthetic. So, and if I want to make an aggressive style ship, I'll add more points to it. And this was supposed to be more of an attack vessel. So I thought if I angle this, if I point these, if I bring the nacelles from a blunt end to a point, it gives it that kind of a forward motion, but an aggressive one. And so I want it to look like it's going to cut through space as it goes. And despite the beautiful architecture that Jeffries came with, that design just wouldn't fly anymore. So originally I'd drawn with the blend ends and the heavier structures, and just the way Enterprise went, it was a more sleek kind of design shell. And so Klingons get points and hard angles. So
well, so he just mentioned the nacelles. There's only a small section on the nacelle that actually has any glow to it. Does that mean that the nacelles are more armored in your opinion, and in fact simpler than the D7 and Katinga, the latter of which had glowing elements in basically the length of the nacelle? Mm-hmm. And why did you leave such a large hole at the back of the nacelle, which takes about 1/4 of its frame?
Well, there's actually two reasons because of that. And I was visiting Edwards Air Force Base a lot back then because there's two gentlemen, Tony Moore and Pete Merlin. They work in the archives. And I would use them all the time if I needed, what does Earth future ships possibly going to be in the Edwards Air Force Base future? And because we're always trying to bridge those gaps. And I thought, well, whatever they're working on, it'd be cool to get to see and maybe incorporate those ideas as like farther future stuff from where they are now. And they were showing me some stuff on some of the stealth fighters. And the engines basically are in these little doors, and they open up, and that's where the thrust system comes out. And it's basically a cloaking camouflage for the engines. And that's why I thought, well, it'd be cool to kind of make that actual red array on the back much smaller. And I was always a fan of the Y-wing from Star Wars, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if that little back end is open and the thrust is basically funneled through that? And I don't believe that translated in the model. I think it's a solid piece, but in the drawing it was meant to be open, and that was just basically a thrust guide for that engine. So that's where those two details came from.
That's cool.
Y-wing inspiration, I like it. Now, if you look at the bridge module, it is far more detailed than the D7's design, but still keeps a forward torpedo launcher. There are a lot of other details to this part of the ship, however, especially what appears to be a hatch on either side of the module. Do you want to give us what you had in mind when designing this section of the ship, and what on earth that piece is?
There you go. Well, it was modeled. It looks like a hatch, but when we were doing Deep Space Nine, we were doing an episode called Way of the Warrior, and we drew a kind of a bird of prey for that particular episode, and it had like folding wings. It had all kinds of stuff, and I thought, why not put torpedo launchers on all three sides of the bridge? And those were originally going to be torpedo launchers on the side of that bridge module, and I never got to do more than that 3/4 drawing that the 3D modelers took to make the model from. So I never got to do anything more than that to get the details and stuff. And so the shape was there, and they turned it into hatches. So that's kind of where that design element came from. And that big sweep in there is basically just to give you a little bit more range when you're firing, so you can angle your shot a little bit more and not hit the edge of the ship.
That's cool.
That's cool. So that was that.
So you're telling me some Klingon designer on Kronos got fired because he was supposed to make those torpedo tubes and ended up being hatches, and they're like, we needed more weapons. Put you to death.
There you go. But that's the cool thing about the collaboration of art department and the CG world. I always try not to go too far with the details, because the more you do, the less creativity the next guy gets to have. And it's more fun to see their interpretations of things, as opposed to, this is the rock solid idea, you got to stick to it. And that's what's kind of nice, because a lot of the CG guys that worked on it, that's all they'd need is a 3/4, and they just let their imaginations run. While other guys would go, boy, I sure could use more plans. And it just depended on who was doing the modeling. And so if they would ask for views, would come up with them, and some would be like, oh, that's great, the more views the better, while others would go, oh, this is great, then I could do this and this and that and add these things. And that's what's always fun about it, is working with the CG guys. And they'd send stuff over like, what do you think of this? And so it was a good time. A lot of good times watching what they'd do.
When you started designing the ship, did you have any idea how large you wanted it to be, especially in regards to the NX-01? And what did you do design-wise to highlight the size?
Size on miniatures is usually determined by windows, and this one's kind of void of windows. It was supposed to be more stealthy than anything else. Size is usually determined by the effects supervisor, which would either be Peter Lauritsen or Dan Curry or Mike Moore, all those guys. They kind of determine that as they're doing it. And they get separate notes than what I would get. So when they're putting the scenes together and they're showing the dailies back, they'll go, oh man, make the ship bigger, make it smaller. Wouldn't that be cool if it's more a stealthy thing than a big thing? And so that all happens basically after it leaves us, unless there's a big description, like it says the super huge Klingon ship comes in, then you know you're drawing something big, and you add a lot of little tiny windows. But that's kind of the scale monitor, is what size windows you have on a ship. And if you aren't sure, just leave them off, and then you're in good shape. Then you can turn them into running lights, and you're all right.
Oh, perfect.
Did you have a vague size in mind when you were designing her? Even just about the same size as an X-01, or much bigger or much smaller? Or about the same size as the X?
Once in a while, they'll ask for a scale, and I'll put the NX-01 in the drawing if they're requiring a scale. And it only happened a few times, mostly with cargo ships and smaller stuff. They go, what's the scale to the NX-01? So I draw them side by side. The same with like the Fortunate and some of the other ships. But unless they asked for it, that was kind of where they would go with it. And you don't want to kind of go overboard and say, here's the scale I was thinking. They'll go, well, you don't know what we're doing yet. And so it's just easier to come up with a design that could go big or small in the shot. And then again, if they did need it, you'd add the lights or what you needed to do the scale, or the CG guys would. But if they didn't ask for it, you tried not to put your own scale on things. You try not to put a name on it unless they give you a name or a number. So even artistically, you go, why don't you put a number on it just to put a number? You just wouldn't do that. So
one big design change for these older Enterprise-era Klingon ships was moving away from the nacelle-mounted disruptor cannons and giving the ship a dedicated set of lower cannons. These dedicated weapons are about the same size as the aft-symmetrical warp governor of the NX-01, so pretty big for guns. So talk us through design choice of why having these huge cannons and yeah.
Because they're Klingons. Why else?
Well, it's a new take. I mean, why?
Yeah. Well, again, looking back on stuff, we'll use like Soviet architecture, we'll use World War II German architecture, and they were constantly making bigger guns. And I was just getting introduced to the computer on Enterprise, and Mike Akuda would show me, hey, look, if you Google this, you can get all these pictures. Like, oh, you're kidding me. And so we were looking at gigantic railroad cannons from World War II. They were biggest things I ever saw in my life. That'd be, I don't know, the length of like 15 train cars, but it's one with these huge cannons on it. And a lot of that would just taper over. Go, the Klingons need big guns, and so that's where you'd go. And the ship's basically to carry that gun to cause as much destruction as you can. So if the ship's small, the gun's still going to be big, and that was it. But sometimes you go too big or too many, and you get pulled back. And a lot of times I put a belly gun on the bottom of those Klingon ships. That one actually had one, and it got X'd out in the design process. But I always put one like right dead center, so it would shoot right under the bridge, right between the two wings, and it had a frontwards and backwards firing capability.
Well, that is on this. That is on the battlecruiser version. The tanker doesn't have one, but the battlecruiser does.
Right, and they preferred that to be more integrated in the ship as opposed to a separate gun. So it looked in a lot of words they'd say, yeah, it looks like a machine gun on a World War II Jeep. Like, okay, so it would incorporate into the body as opposed to having it as a separate piece.
So looking at the 3D model, there's like a fin on the top of each nacelle where disruptor would potentially go. Do you think this is a smaller secondary disruptor cannon, or could be? And did you think the ship was only armed with torpedoes and larger cannons like we saw, or did you intend this to be a meaty, armed-to-the-teeth Klingon warship?
That little detail is actually architectural, but after I drew it, I put a gap between the gun and the architecture line, and it could easily be another cannon up on top of it. And so a lot of times things are drawn by accident when they're meant to be architectural. And when you're done, you go, hey, that could be a gun. And don't need to put the gun barrels on it and stuff. And if they wanted to animate it, they got the space to do it. With the Klingons, like I said, I figured it would be armed enough. You have the torpedo launchers up front, you got the cannons on the side, and you got the big belly gun. So you're pretty good. On the back, I think this is like the most easily to attack point of view because you only have the single launcher on the back. And but that's always the way they want a head-on fight, not shot in the butt. So there you are.
Now that is the next question, John. Is the detail at the back an after torpedo launcher? Because we don't see that for a lot of later on Klingon ships. So is that an after torpedo launcher?
It was in the modeling when we saw the model of it. There was the launcher in the back. So yeah, you don't a lot of stuff is on there you don't get a chance to see. But if I'm not mistaken, I think when Doug had his Drexler files up, I think he posted that ship and all the views, and I believe that you can see it on there. And I think he's moved all those to Facebook now, so it should be there. And I want to say, I don't think it was either Rob or Pierre that did that, and I'm probably wrong. It's probably Koji, but it was one of those three guys.
Now, the CG model was made by the talented team over at Eden Effects. Did they make the ship just as you had designed her, or did they add anything extra or take anything away that you really wanted there?
No, kind of like what I was saying earlier, the collaboration is really cool. And if they add something, they usually call up, hey, can we do this or do that? And I go, oh, yeah, that's great. So there's really, I usually look forward to see what they do because usually I only have time to do the 3/4 views. And so to see what they get in there is really quite fascinating. And it's always great to see. And never like, oh boy, I wish this would have happened. I never ever had to go through that. So it was great.
Cool. And finally, John, what was your least favorite thing and most favorite thing about the D5? And is there anything you would have changed if you're now given the chance?
The color I thought was great. I really liked that deep colors that they were going with. They always put it in that moody lighting, which I thought was really cool. And it almost makes them like a 1950s monster movie. So you never really see the full creature. It's always kind of hidden. So it's like the monsters of space and in the moody lighting that put on it. Well, the Starship stuff was always kind of brightly lit, and then you'd get these beauty shots and stuff, while the bad guys were kind of subdued in the light. And that was always kind of cool the way they did that. I don't think I would have changed anything on it. Klingons were always fun, and as far as approval goes, like I was saying, they usually went in pretty quickly, and so usually the first ideas are always kind of my favorite anyway, as an illustrator point of view. Don't have a lot of time to work on them, so you try really hard to put everything you like in the first drawing, and there you go. And that one actually went through very good, and I was very happy with it. I would have liked to have spent more time working on the panel detail on the wings, and that's always kind of the challenging part, because you have the bird of prey with the beautiful hawk feather patterns going on there, and then you have the original series that had basically not much design in there until you got to the motion picture, and kind of trying to mix those two on there. That it's kind of the iconic Klingon pattern. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and that one didn't get to spend as much time on the wings detailing as I'd like to.
All right, well, that's it, John. Thank you very much for joining us today, and learning about the D5 is just awesome. So Always a pleasure to have you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, John.
Same here. Love being here. Thank you.
And thank you to John for coming on our show and talking about one of his creations. Always awesome to have him here. So
Always awesome.
now we move on to the part of the show where we talk about the things that we like and dislike about this particular design. What I like most about the design is the overall sleekness of it. It's got a very nice look that fits well into the time period, and it can easily be traced to future Klingon designs that we see in the future, as they're kind of more bulked out versions of this basic design. Also, the warp nacelles have a very interesting new Klingon look to them with that cutout section in the back. It's a very neat feature that we haven't seen before. Another thing I found interesting was the reuse of this space frame for a freighter type vessel. Just a stripped down older space frame, I think, refitted into a new style of ship, which is kind of something that would happen in the military world. They would just reuse, and I kind of like that feature.
Although, what do you think about the Akudogram saying 75 meters? And this is Mike Akuda inventing it. Do you think that's a second version of the ship that's that small?
75, it's not big at all.
That's 20 meters, 24 meters smaller than the Scout Bird of Prey.
Yeah,
and it's a longer ship. It's got more.
So yeah, I think that was just a mistake, and one of those Star Trek mistakes that happens. But yeah, but I think the fact that there's two versions of the ship is very cool. So, and that's it.
Yeah, I really like this design. I think it's a great proto version, feeling different, and yet keeping a lot of the artistic cues of the D7, which, as you said, really speaks to its evolution. I like her more aggressive and yet primitive feel. I do think the support beams work, and yeah, like you said, I just overall like the design. Would have been nice to have seen her more, and in a fleet of different Klingon ships, but I'm glad we got through it a couple of times. And we got to in Axanar what a potential D6 would have been. It would have been nice to have seen another evolution to see how John could have pushed that even further forward, because how would you have taken that stylistically and midway pointed it, I think Twice did a great job, but I would love to have seen John take that on as well.
Mm-hmm. So now what I don't like about this, and to be honest, there really isn't that much. One of my biggest beefs with any Enterprise-era Klingon ship is the visible rigging on the exterior of the ship. I get why John did it, and it's a cool idea, but personally, I'm not a real fan of it. It just kind of makes... I don't know why I don't like it. It just doesn't make the ship look strong. And
it's not spaceshipy.
That being said, it is kind of. It would make sense almost, but I'm not happy with it personally. That's all I'm saying. Other than that, I think it's a pretty fantastic ship, and it's definitely one of my favorite Klingon designs. So that's all I have to say about that. There's not much I don't like about it. Good job, John.
Yeah. And what I don't like, I think I would like to have seen more nacelle elements on the nacelles, just more glowing parts. Perhaps more weapon emplacements like the Bird of Prey had. Just scattered all over the place to give it, a better sense of scale and of menace, because it's meant to be the D5, which evolves into the this is the battleship design, and it feels a little bit underwhelming. That said, we talked to John, as you just saw, and he was not designing the D5, the precursor to the battlecruiser, which was designing another Klingon ship. So I think if they'd said those two letters D5, it probably have altered his design a little bit. Just a bit more decked out, as it was meant to be the strongest ship in the Klingon Armada. Small things, really. And I think just overall, while I like it, I think it's not boring, but there's a lack of detail and nuance to design. Like, it's sort of rudimentary. That's obviously intentional, but I think it's not one you'd pick as the prettiest or anything. It's kind of a rudimentary ship. And it feels almost too basic.
It's almost like the race car of the Klingon fleet. It's got that sleek profile to it.
I like that.
Like a dragster, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. But I think we need to talk about the D4 at some point, the unused concept, because then talk about how the evolution between the D4 to D5 will be an interesting discussion, how the design points might have changed.
Yeah. Well, that's it for another exciting episode of Trekyards. So cool to hear from John about this very cool ship. So as usual, we hope you click that like button as well as the subscribe one for more regular Trekyards in the future, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you feel so inclined and want to help us to continue to bring you weekly Trekyards episodes, please consider heading over to our Patreon or to trekyards.com and clicking on the donate buttons. Anything you can donate would be greatly appreciated and help us out immensely. Yeah. Anyways, I think that's it. So until next time, I'm Captain Foley.
And I'm Koala Kongs.
And we will see you all in Stovacor, because today is a good day to die. Kapla! That's the wrong.
Yes, yes.
Kapla!
Bye, guys.
Bye.